Hi, I'm Darren. I want to tell you about my recent experience of fishing over Labor Day weekend. I went for a short weekend vacation, but oh my gosh, it was the worst experience. I will never forget it. So that's what I'm going to tell you about. So my story, 2 weeks before, I was like, yeah, sure, I'm a real avid fisher, so, and normally I go to the bay and
I just sit on one of the islands and fish there. My friend said, no, this is deep sea fishing, and I was like, wow, I have some experience, but I've rarely gone. So I was pumped about this. Now, sailfish and catching big tuna fish. So, and a really big boat too. So yeah, I was really excited. But I asked how much it cost, and he said, no, it's fine, it's going to be free. And I was like, well, okay then. I was so excited about this, I couldn't wait. So on Friday at about 7 at night, we all got there. We planned on fishing till about Sunday, so at about 10, so about 36 hours altogether. So for 2 nights on the ocean. Okay, so we all got there at about 7. And we packed all of our things, drinks, food, everything, our gear, in the boat. And now there were 7 people that were going with us. 3 of them were deaf and 4 were hearing. So there was me and one other guy that I knew really well, and then my deaf friend knew 2 of the hearing people pretty well, and then the other 2 not as much. I didn't know any of them at all, but they seemed nice. So 2 of them were the captain and the skipper, and one of them was a really good mechanic, and he knew a lot about fixing boats and how they work and stuff. So I felt good. I felt like we'd be safe. So we get on the boat, and we're finally getting out into the water. The waves were about 3 to 4 feet. We were going pretty slow. It was nice. It was a very smooth ride. And I was just dreaming about all these huge fish I'd be catching. So once we finally got out into the ocean, we started going pretty fast. And we went about 80 to 100 miles offshore. I experienced about maybe 20 miles offshore, but we were going really far. I'd never done it, but they got, so they were going at about 1/4 of the speed possible. Now, if I were the captain, I would have gone half the speed and gotten there a little bit quicker, maybe 2 or 3 hours. But this took forever. So, and it took about 6 hours. I was getting a little impatient, but I didn't say anything. They're the captain, so it's his boat, and it was free, so I didn't want to say anything or complain. So I'm waiting. I'm talking with some people. They're having some drinks. The 2 other deaf people I knew really well. I'd grown up with them, so we were chatting a lot. So finally, hours later, at midnight, we finally got to the place where we were going to stop. There were oil rigs out in the distance that we could see, 4 to 5 miles away. We could see the lights. The sky was pitch black. It was so dark. It was really cool. I was pretty excited about this. So we let out the 4 fishing poles that were the trolling fishing poles that are connected to the boat. And we were going at about 3 knots, so the engines were going pretty slow. And we had these poles up waiting to see if we would catch a fish, and I was really excited. I was wondering why we were trying to catch these sailfish at night, but, you know, whatever. It's free, so I wasn't going to complain. So we're waiting. It was kind of boring. So we decided to give up and take in all of our tools and go to another place. Go to another location. Where we could maybe get some kingfish or red vipers and all these different kinds of fish. And I thought, you know, it's better than that thing, so it'd be cool to take something home with me. So we went a lot further. We were about 80 miles and we went even to 100 miles offshore. A friend of mine who invited me on the trip was asking why we were going so far and why we were still going, because, you know, it was getting late, but whatever. We still had a second night, so I wasn't too concerned about it. So we're kind of just chatting, and it's after 14 hours. Can you imagine just sitting there and not having caught anything yet? So I went down. Oh, let me first explain what the boat was like. In the back, it opened up for, you know, to put supplies in, fishing supplies and stuff. And in the middle was like a canopy where you could sit in, and then the bottom was where the front underneath was where the beds were. So that's where you can sleep, and there's a bunch of different bunks. And then you walk up and out and you're under the canopy, and then the back has the supplies and stuff. So anyway, I went to sleep. There was AC and there was satellite TV. So I was watching football, and there were 3 different games on. I was trying to keep track of both the football game and the fishing to see if they caught anything, but I really just think we were having really bad luck, and I was really burnt out, so after 14 hours of waiting for fish, I was kind of tired. I'd noticed that the waves had gotten a little bit higher, about 9 feet now, but, you know, I wasn't concerned. Because this boat was huge, it was massive, about 50 feet. So I figured that could handle up to 20 feet of waves, no problem. But if it got past 20 feet, that'd be a little dangerous, but we were fine for now. So I was watching TV and sleeping, and then about Saturday about midnight, I was, you know, tired, I felt gross, and I'd eaten, so I was going to bed. And they were still searching for tuna, so whatever. So underneath the boat is where the engine was. And in the middle of that whole mechanics, there was a generator. So in the middle of the night while I was sleeping, I started smelling the smoke coming out of the area where the generator is. And I woke up and let somebody know. I think it's smoking. Something's smoking down there. They were like, oh no, it's fine, the engine's just hot because it's moving a lot and the smoke is coming from that. And I was like, alright, whatever. Went back to sleep, but then it got worse. So we opened it up, and smoke flew out of there. So one of the engines had burnt out. The oil had gotten all over the place, so
I was like, I told you, and they had no idea what was going on, so that was a little weird, but they turned that one off, so now we were just running on one engine. So it wasn't great, but it was still okay. So that was at midnight. And then about 2 hours sleep. 2 hours later, I was still tired, so I went back to sleep. And the boat was moving a lot all of a sudden. I woke up and people were walking around a lot. So I went up outside to figure out what was going on, and they opened it again. Now the steering wheel is a little bit above where the canopy is, and the connection from the steering to the rudder was broken. They couldn't steer, they couldn't do anything with the boat because it was broken. They had no connection to the rudder. So now I was awake, and I noticed that the waves were still at about 8 to 9 feet. And the boat was moving pretty heavily, so we collected all the fishing gear. Meanwhile, the mechanic went down to try to see what was the problem. 2 hours later, they'd finally gotten it connected back to the steering wheel and the rudder. So that was a relief. And then we noticed on the that there was going to be a cold front coming in, about 35 to 40 miles an hour, so the wind was going to get worse. And the waves were already, getting really high and moving the boat, and sometimes splashing over into the boat, and they were really choppy. So I figured, we should just stop and go home. We only had about 14 more hours left of fishing, so I just said we'll just go, because I wasn't really comfortable in this situation. And I was kind of disappointed because we didn't really catch any fish, even though we had these lines out the whole time. But the sailfish were stubborn, and so I guess it was just a waste of time, but it was free, so, decided to go home. So that was about 3 in the morning. And all of a sudden the power turns off. There was no power, so the power steering was off and the boat was just going all over the place. And the waves had gotten to be about 10 to 12 feet now. They were just going really high, and they were even blocking out the moon and the stars a little bit. And I was getting splashed with the waves, and some of the people who were sleeping had fallen off the beds. And all of our supplies had fallen over as well, so we put them all in the front of the boat where the beds are, because we didn't want them all falling out all over the deck. I had not gotten enough sleep, very little sleep, and my head was rocking back and forth. I felt like I was getting whiplash. And they were, meanwhile, they were down trying to fix the generator, and realized that they'd forgotten to put water in it. So they put water in it and got some oil in it, and then we tried to see if it started working, and 2 hours later, still waiting. And then finally they got it back going. The lights were on, so that was good. We still only had one rudder, or one engine, but that was fine. Because everything had been off. The TV was off, the lights were off, the power steering was off. Everything was off. And we had nothing. And this one little engine was fighting to keep us afloat, especially with the waves that were getting higher and higher by the minute. They were coming at us from all over the place. You could not predict where it was coming from. And it was dark, so you couldn't see the waves either. Now, while they were fixing the generator, we didn't want to be completely up to the moving according to the waves, so there's a special parachute that you can put out, and the water collects in it and slows the boat down and weighs it down a little bit. So finally, when the generator was back and working, we tried to get the parachute back into the boat. I had a little bit experience with this, but so I told them to turn the machine off, or turn the engine off, so we could get the parachute in and then go back home. And I felt like it was still on. I said, no, turn it off. But they said turn it on neutral, but they did not understand, because if it's in neutral, it's still moving a little bit. So the waves can still move through it and it'll move, but if it's off, it'll be locked. So this thing is about 500 pounds with all the water in it, so it was hard enough as it is to get it over the boat. And then, since the boat was out of control, the parachute got stuck in the engine because it was in neutral. So we wanted to get home and get the generator on and go home quickly, but it was stuck. So one of the guys got some snorkeling gear on to try to go get it unstuck. And I didn't think it was such a good idea, but he had experience with it, so he wanted to go in. So we had to take a breath and then go under to try to get the parachute unstuck. But he kept hitting up against the bottom of the boat, and he was all bloodied and scratched. He tried for a few minutes, and we had him on a life vest so we could pull him out if we needed to. But he was going all over the place under the boat. So we finally pulled him back in. And he was scratched real badly. And the waves were about 8 to 10 feet at this point. And even though he was underwater, it was still really bad. And so that's about 6 in the morning now when this is happening, and the sun is starting to come up. Also the gust kept getting worse and worse. The waves were spilling over onto the boat and rocking us really high on either side. And we were flying all over the place. There were some people that were asleep, but they were drunk, so that's the only reason I can imagine that they were sleeping. So I had enough, and we called the Coast Guard. And they said that they were on their way, but it would take about 5 hours for them to get to us. Even at full speed, they'd be going as fast as they could, and it'd take 5 hours. So we were waiting for them to get there, and meanwhile, we're just going all over the place. There's no AC, and it's hot, and I'm thirsty, and the wind is getting stronger, and it was just terrible. And the waves would be going higher than the boat, and they were just taking us all over the place. I was starting to get a little nervous. But I do know, do have enough experience to know that if it gets to about 20 feet on a 50-foot boat, then we would be okay. About 9 in the morning, it was at about 12 feet. But I was getting a little paranoid because it just kept getting worse. The other people thought it wasn't a big deal, so I was still a little concerned. The waves are, 12 to 15 feet. And if it got past 20 feet, I would be worried. But 15, it's, enough to make my heart race, but I was okay. Finally, the Coast Guard boat got here and connected us, threw us a line and got us connected so they would be able to tow us home. Their boat was 40 feet, and ours was 50, so I wasn't sure if it was strong enough to get us there, but I figured they had a really strong rope or really strong engines or something. And it would take us about 10 or 11 hours to get back there. Meanwhile, the boat's still rocking crazily, and the rope that was connecting us broke. So they got us connected to another line, and it was hectic, crazy ride home. Normally, you can kind of walk around on the boat and with your sea legs, but I could not. I had to crawl everywhere. I was covered in bruises. And my neck was really sore. I'm pretty sure I jammed my wrist or something. And I lost my hat. The wind had blew it off. It was my favorite fishing hat. I'd had it for like 12 years. I loved that hat. And it blew off. So I was just, we were full of bad luck this weekend. Oh. Finally, we got into the bay. And our boat finally pulled up to a stop. I had experienced my own perfect storm. That fishing experience was awful. It was the worst ever. So the people who owned it, I asked how old the boat was. They said it was built in 1968. They said that they'd put in new engines and stuff, but I found out they'd rebuilt little bits and pieces of it. So that's why it was falling apart. I was sore and angry, and it was just terrible. So the point of this story is that you have to respect Mother Nature.